Chapter 9. The UV light touched the edge of the abyss, and sparks of light popped like fireworks. The underwater world, which had been mostly silent apart from her rebreather's bubbles and the whisper of the current, suddenly roared with sound. Flora and fauna sprayed down on her from the church's long, tall roof like discolored, malformed snow, while splinters of wood jetted through the water like spears. A hand grabbed her shoulder and pulled her away from the window, her UV light leaving zigzagging sparkles in its wake. A crackling sound filled her ears, and it took her less than a heartbeat to know what it meant. Before she could yell a warning, Alan clutched her to his large chest and kicked away from the church. "It's changing!" she managed through panicked breaths.
"The fuck does that?"
Hippie asked, but didn't finish the thought. A tentacle as thick as a man's thigh flicked through the open window beneath the church's shadow, its tapered end slashing through the water where Sarah's head had been a few seconds before.
"Fucking hell!"
Rags yelled out.
"Weapons free,"
Alan said, and pushed Sarah off his chest. She floated through the water for a brief second before turning back to the church. The tentacle slapped the ocean floor, its end thickening with each strike, clouding the water with a fog of fine white sand. The church's interior flashed, and a powerful white light burned near the building's ceiling. The church wall exploded outward, spraying wood, barnacle shells, and air bubbles. Rags or Hippie had fired a phosphorus bolt into the church. Sarah doubted they'd hit the creature from where they'd taken up station, but the round had damaged the wall. The eave overhanging it collapsed into a tumble of rotted wood. Sunlight pierced the church's shadowy interior, and Sarah nearly screamed. A thick, shimmering pool of absolute darkness covered the ceiling. Giant tentacles hung down from it like overgrown tree roots, each tipped with a thin, razor-sharp hook. Sparks danced off the small portion of the creature directly exposed to the daylight. The M2 thing shifted away from the light, its sun-exposed edges burning like embers. A rapid, insectile clicking sound, alien yet all too identifiable as pained rage, filled her ears and vibrated her teeth. She pulled her rifle into position, barely aimed, and pulled the trigger. The bolt shot from the rifle and into the church. While it didn't hit the creature square, the round struck the east ceiling and exploded into a flash of white. The clicking rose in tempo until it became a jagged tone. A fireworks display of dazzling white burst through the exposed east wall. A long tentacle lashed out from the darkness, its discolored, tapered end meeting the sunlight, water boiling and bubbling around the frying limb. The ocean roared with another shriek of pain, the offbeat clicking rising to an unearthly cry that rattled her brain. The tentacle retracted into the shadows before a meter-long eye stalk popped out and peered at her, its doll-like dead orb swiveling to and fro at incredible speed. Rags shouted something about an eye. Hippie made a sound akin to a scream. Alan hesitated several beats before his finger found the trigger and pulled. The projectile burst from the rifle and landed a scant meter from where Sarah's had detonated. Through the missing wall and eave, she watched a thick, discolored line race across the ceiling. M2, still in a mostly liquid form, split itself just as one side of it lit up like a small star. The flash left an afterimage of tentacles slicing angrily through the water and stalks retreating from the dark pool. 2 rounds flew through the church's entrance and upward at the ceiling, each exploding in a blinding flash of sunlight. Sarah tried to blink away the afterimage, but for a moment it seemed it was permanently welded to her corneas. The church ceiling groaned like a wounded animal as corroded nails and fasteners sheared. The crackling sound increased in volume, and the tentacles rose into the ceiling. Alan fired another bolt, which struck the hardening oil slick dead center. The bolt traveled through the pool and punched into the wood beyond it. The projectile's catalyzer mixed with the water and lit the phosphorus payload before the ignited pellets ejected from the bolt like a 2,000°C shotgun blast. The pellets burned in the water for less than a heartbeat, but that was more than enough to ignite M2. A brief orange eldritch glow lit the inside of the church before a pulse of blinding light blotted out the world, and an explosion rocked her eardrums. The church wall detonated into chunks and splinters, and something massive hurtled at her through the cloud of debris. The object hit her like a linebacker and sent her tumbling backwards, her rebreather slipping for an instant, and seawater finding its way in. Her vision blurred and she coughed while more debris rushed by her. Someone was yelling. Someone was screaming. Someone was choking to death. And it was her. Blind and panicked, Sarah didn't know which way was up. Her body tingled with pain and shock as she flailed her numb arms and kicked her jelly legs. Something sliced through her wetsuit. She screamed, her blinded mind conjuring the image of an obsidian tentacle reaching to disembowel her. She couldn't catch her breath with the ocean water trapped in her lungs. Her desperate hands raised to pull off the rebreather, but a rifle sling tangled her arms. Her vision popped with black flowers, consciousness fleeing in the face of asphyxiation. Sarah scrabbled with rapidly dwindling energy when she felt something grasp her waist. Weight suddenly fell from her, and she tumbled again before rising upward. The strong arm holding her flexed hard against her chest and forced water from her lungs. She sputtered, coughed, and vomited in her mask. Air. A tiny gasp of air. The flowers pulsed and became translucent, the sunlight a bare meter away. She broke the surface, tilted backward, and faced the sky. Her rebreather and mask popped from her face, and a moment later, fingers pulled gently but firmly on her short hair. She opened her mouth and vomited one last gasp of seawater before a sip of salty fresh air entered her lungs. "Sarah?" Alan called to her. No, not calling. He was beneath her. She glanced left and saw a shoulder that wasn't hers. She lay atop him while he treaded water. She sputtered. "It's okay. Just breathe. Just breathe for me, okay?" The ringing in her ears slowly decreased in volume, and she heard the sound of waves breaking, birds crying and chirping, and a roll of what might have been distant thunder. She breathed her lungs full and slowly exhaled in a thin stream. Her vision returned in clarity, and the gauzy layer of confusion that had encased her mind dissolved. "Alan," she said, "I can swim." He chuckled. "Don't doubt it. Just hold for a moment here. Kojo's coming." Without her mask, the jawbone receiver had fallen off. "Where's Rags and Hippie?" "They're coming," he said. "Hippie took a bad hit like you did, so don't feel special." "Bad hit?" Sarah asked and shook her head hard, instantly regretting it. The ringing in her ears returned, as did the feeling of unreality. The next bolt of pain from an oncoming migraine quickly brought her back. "Bad hit," Alan agreed. "I think it was a pew. Came flying out of the debris like a missile and hit you square. Not sure if you broke anything." He paused, and Sarah heard the muted whine of electric motors. "Another reason you're waiting with me." "Him too. Did it—" "We got it," Alan said. She shook her head. "We need to make sure. We need to go back down there and—" "Not any time soon," he said. "Not sure how much phosphorus was in those bolts. Might have contaminated the water there. We'll check it out soon, okay? Just not right now." Sarah wanted to say something else, but she was tired. A hitch of pain had started in her rib cage, and she knew that feeling all too well. The pew that struck her might have bruised or cracked a rib. Wonderful. The electric whine increased in volume, and Sarah raised her head slightly. Kojo stood tall on the dais, his head cocked down to peer at them, hands moving over the controls. His shirt and khakis dripped with water, as did his head. The Zode looked as though it had been doused. "Okay, Sarah," Alan said. "Can you move your hands?" She could. "Legs? Feet? No problem there either." "How's your neck?" "Stiffening," she said. "Everything's moving just fine, though." "Good. I'm going to slide out from under you. Ready?" It was infuriating not knowing whether or not he was patronizing her. She couldn't stand the idea. A surge of competitive need chased away another layer of mental and physical fog. "Ready." The feel of his body beneath her disappeared, and she sagged in the water, her legs slowly dipping down. After flexing her knees and testing her feet, she let her legs down into the water and gently kicked to keep herself steady. Now upright, she turned to Alan. His mask sat atop his head. The shield was cracked with a nail sticking out. A trickle of blood ran down the side of his face from a rip in the top of the wetsuit, the grin on his face a comical contrast. "There you go," he said cheerily. "No permanent harm done." "You're bleeding." He laughed. "So are you. So is everyone." Something splashed behind her, and Sarah turned. Kojo had dropped the diving platform into the water. He gestured to her. "You first. K&B rules," he said, his voice low and grim. She glared at him for a beat before finally pulling herself onto the platform. Kojo offered his hand, and she allowed him to help her over the gunwale and into the Zode. "Take a seat back there," he said, jerking his thumb at the stern. Sarah got the hint. They were loading up without question or discussion. In a way, she couldn't blame them. Alan quickly boarded, and a moment later Rags and Hippie appeared near the platform. Hippie's wetsuit bled from a dozen perforations. Surface scratches. Another on his scalp bled more profusely, but the man seemed unconcerned. His eyes looked shocked, as though he wasn't quite sure where he was. Sarah's heart sank. She'd seen that look before. Hell, she'd worn it. For a few minutes after her first encounter with him, too, reality had seemed to fade away, leaving her trapped in a bad acid trip where every shadow could come to life and attack you. The world no longer made sense. If not for the responsibility of leading her team, coupled with her military training, she probably would have completely vapor-locked until one of the damn things dissolved her. "Fuck her," Kojo said. "That was a goddamn nuke. Wave nearly capsized the Zode." The PNG native offered Hippie his hand and pulled him into the boat. For a moment, Hippie merely stood there, his eyes practically looking through Kojo rather than at him. "Hey," Kojo said, and snapped his fingers before Hippie's face. "You there, mate?" Hippie blinked hard before coming back to himself. "You wouldn't believe it," he said without a hint of humor. Kojo's grin collapsed. "Have to see it, eh?" Hippie nodded weakly. "You might understand then. Before you think you've seen it all," Kojo said, "you should see what's left of Urakukur." Sarah heard the words, immediately stood and looked over the bow. Layers upon layers of broken wood covered the water where the church should have been. A large panel of the roof floated on the green water, flames licking upward from the hat that had once been the steeple. The next wave covered the fire, and a curl of black smoke rose before the breeze tore it apart. "Fuck me," Sarah whispered. Rags got into the boat without comment, followed Sarah's gaze, and shook her head. Instead of saying anything, Rags cast a nervous smile at Sarah before sitting to the side of the dais, her rifle still held in one hand. Sarah thought the woman had a concussion, or maybe a hangover from her first M2 encounter. Rags's dazed eyes didn't seem focused on anything. Concussion. Sarah wouldn't be surprised if they all had one. That'd have been a hell of an explosion. Alan removed his tank and placed it on the deck. Hippie followed suit, and after a long sigh, Rags stood and did the same. Not sure what else to do, Sarah struggled out of her equipment, mostly while sitting. She wasn't sure she trusted her legs yet, and who could blame her? Alan shaded his eyes against the sun. "Well, still early. Anyone up for another swim?" Hippie growled low in his throat. "Second breakfast, you asshole." "Love second breakfast," Kojo said. He stowed the dive platform, retrieved the tanks and rifles, and placed them back in the racks. "Think maybe a nap might be in order, too?" "After debrief," Alan said. "Get us back to the ship." He made his way to the rear and sat next to Sarah. He held up 2 fingers. "How many?" She rolled her eyes. 2 fingers, 2 eyes, 2 hands. Also, that cut in your scalp needs a stitch or 2. He nodded, his easy grin fading a bit. "That was him too?" "That was him too," she agreed. "You didn't tell us it would blow the fucking building up," he whispered. Sarah felt a flash of anger but quickly pushed it away. Getting pissy wasn't going to help. "Didn't know," she said. "The shock wave was massive," Alan finished for her. "From the briefing, I figured it would catch fire and that would be that." "So did I." He sighed. "Guess I know how an entire trench blew up. Something that big? No wonder it created a tsunami." That was an interesting point. The thing in the church had been at least as large as the creature at Ben Top, maybe more so. With it curled up against the ceiling as a single massive pool, it was impossible to guess its actual mass. For all they knew, it had been twice the size of the Ben Top M2 entity. "Biggest question I have," Alan continued, "is whether or not we actually destroyed it." "Good question," she wanted to say. Then again, if the explosion was that powerful, how could any of it have survived? Any attempt to splinter itself would have been futile, depending on the heat and the flash. The boat's motors came to life, and Kojo brought the Zode around in a calm, gentle 180-degree turn. "I don't know," she finally said, "but I think so." "Think so," Alan muttered. He wiped idly at the cut on his scalp. A runner of blood rolled down and dripped over his left eye. He sighed and wiped at it again before placing his hand against the cut. "No way of knowing." She shook her head. "No." "I figured," he said. The Zode made its way back to Keko, the animals sharing a nervous silence. Chapter 10. Upon landing at Keko, Hippie stepped off with Alan for a quick stitch and bandage party while Rags and Kojo raised the Zode to the deck. They didn't bother properly securing it. No point in stowing the boat fully, unless Keko needed to travel several nautical miles at cruising speed. Hippie and Alan eventually reappeared sans wetsuits. Sarah had already stripped away hers, her damp swimsuit still on her skin. She helped the animals stow the tanks and rifles and lay out the rebreathers and masks for inspection before their next dip. Silence, broken only by the occasional grunt, order, or question, had descended over the group like doom. It was the fate of the adrenaline rush, the leftover emptiness gnawing away at you like coming down from a good high. When they finished, she headed to the galley, surprised to find a fresh pot of coffee, a pitcher of juice, fruit, and a water service ready for them. Sarah couldn't help smiling. This really was like being on a cruise. Exhausted and ready for a nap, she poured a cup of black coffee and filled an insulated mug with cold water. She'd nap, but not now. Right now she needed to worry about the animals. Instead of talking about what they'd seen, Rags, Alan, and Hippie looked concerned. Maybe scared was a better word. She hoped it was shock. Sarah walked to one of the fold-out tables, wincing at her bruised or cracked rib. She deposited her cups and sat on the bench, keeping her posture straight despite the pain in her chest. Alan and Hippie poured themselves drinks, grabbed bananas, and joined her at the table. Kojo and Rags appeared a moment later, each in fresh, dry clothes. Sarah cleared her throat after taking a sip of the strong coffee and following it with water, hoping it might chase away the taste of the ocean. "Kojo?" The man's eyebrows raised in a question. "What did you see?" He opened his mouth to speak, reconsidered what he was about to say, and frowned instead. "I don't know," he said. "What I'm sure I saw was a flash beneath the water, and then a massive waterspout that crashed over the Zode, followed by a hell of a wave. Nearly rolled the boat over." Sarah nodded. "It was a big explosion." She did her best to keep her cup from shaking in her hands. Pretending to be calm while her nerves still thrummed with fear wasn't easy. "What are you not sure of?" Kojo grinned in embarrassment. "I don't know. Looked almost like an octopus arm coming out of the water. Happened just before the flash." Sarah might be able to control the shaking of her hands, but not the goosebumps rising on her skin. She hadn't imagined the tentacles of the thing in the church. They hadn't suffered a mass psychotic hallucination. It had happened. Really happened. The wave of fear faded away. Reality seemed a bit fluid these days, and it was good to have an independent observer tell her she wasn't crazy. Yet. Hippie stared down at the table. "Rags and I saw it dripping and crackling, sprouting limbs or appendages or whatever the fuck." He shook his head. "Fucking thing looked right at us." "From eye stalks?" Sarah asked. Hippie raised his head just enough to meet her eyes. "Like a slug." "Like a slug," Sarah repeated. "What about you, Rags? What did you see?" The woman had peeled her banana, the fruit centimeters from her teeth. Rather than pausing, Rags bit into the fruit, chewed, and fussed with the peel. "Fucking nightmare!" The phrase made Sarah grin. "I know that feeling all too well." "We got slow," Alan said. Hesitated. "Wait," Kojo said, his eyes locking with Alan's. "I don't understand what you saw." Alan took a bite from his banana before recounting the church and M2. What Alan had seen or remembered seeing matched Sarah's memory. Rags's and Hippie's additions finished painting the entire picture, not just for Kojo, but for all of the animals. "Liquid," Kojo mused. "Like an oil slick." "Only thick," Rags said. "Like meters thick." Alan took a deep breath. "My first instinct was to bollocks Sarah up for failing to mention a lot of details, but if you think about it, would you have believed any of it?" Hippie exchanged a glance with Rags before he sighed. "Didn't believe any of it until I saw it," he said. "Still not sure I do. If not for the rest of you, I'd think I'd gone insane." After taking another bite of banana, Rags said, "So we're no less sane than we were before. We agree on the general details. My question," she said to Alan, "did we fucking get it?" He glanced at Sarah. "Can we say that for sure?" "Make or break moment," Sarah thought, and said, "No, we can't." Hippie groaned. "Worst case scenario? We find dozens of those burrows on the ocean floor, all heading for points unknown? Or am I missing something even scarier?" "Oh yes, you are," she thought, but didn't say. If we didn't get the entire creature, it's trapped wherever it has hidden from the sun. The pile of rubble that used to be the church is the most likely place. If something survived, Alan finished for her. Right, Sarah said after taking a sip. The taste of the ocean had finally left her mouth, but the coffee felt like acid in her stomach. But I think the chances of that are low at best. Based on? Kojo asked. Sarah shrugged. The fact we're still alive. The group once again fell into silence while Sarah mentally kicked herself. She'd handled this all wrong and needed to get things back on track. Did I see we have an ROV? Sarah asked. Alan blinked at her. A what? An ROV? Underwater robot? Sarah said, doing her best to keep the impatience from her voice. We have one? Bloody thing, Alan said. Yes, we have one. Not worth a shit. Otherwise I'd have suggested we use it to begin with. Sarah frowned. She'd hoped for something good, like one Catfish would have designed. The man had a particularly vitriolic hate for him, too, something to do with it having eaten both his boss and his best friend, and would kill himself to perfect the perfect weapon. For all Sarah knew, that's what he was doing at this very moment. What sensors does it have? Sarah asked. Alan raised his eyes as if reading a schematic tattooed inside his eyelids. Infrared, active sonar, passive sonar, cam feed with blue light filter. That sounds pretty good, actually, Sarah said. Would be, Hippie said, a sly grin on his face. If the bloody hover command worked properly. You can't just tell it to sit somewhere without manually adjusting for the current. In other words, it's only good for short-term stakeouts and relatively experienced pilots. Oh. Sarah peered into her coffee. A granule, just a mere splinter of a bean, floated atop the liquid. As she watched, the granule lengthened, the coffee's oil-like surface boiling and... Sarah, you okay? Alan asked. She came back to herself and coughed back the scream that had stuck in her throat. The coffee in the cup jiggled from her knee bumping the table, but other than that, it was just hot, dirty water. She let out a sigh. Fine, she managed. Dreaming while awake now, she thought to herself. Moore's going to be so happy to hear that. What was I saying? The ROV, Rag said. You really okay? Sarah nodded. Might be a bit more concussed than I thought. Probably goes for all of you, Kojo said. I felt the pressure wave and was 30 meters away and above the surface. Surprised you can still hear it all. Then we take it easy for the rest of the day, Alan said. Except for one thing. Alan blinked at her, his slightly glazed eyes snapping back into focus. What? We need to get the ROV in the water. Kojo can monitor it while we rest, Sarah said. Just get it near the rubble pile and take a peek. You can time-lapse the photos, right? Maybe take one every few minutes for the next hour or two? Why the fuck would we do that? Hippie asked. To make sure it's not just hiding, Alan said, nodding in agreement. Don't give it too much of a chance to escape unnoticed. But Sarah, he said with tinted hands, it's a shit drone. We can't use it for much. Now she really wished Catfish were here, if only to witness one of his epic tantrums and watch the animals squirm. The thought made her grin. The migraine that had hidden itself away stabbed at her left eye. Oh, this is going to be a good one, she thought. What's the range on the drone? It's got an umbilical, Kojo said. 300 meters, I think. It's a right cunt to drive. Slight understatement, Rag said. So not exactly the best fit for this mission. Lovely, Sarah said and sipped at her coffee, the cup trembling slightly in her hands. She didn't want to look down into the liquid surface and see a blacker-than-black eye stalk poking over the cup like a periscope and staring at her with its mix of ambivalence and alien hunger. Paranoia. In defiance of the word, she downed the rest of the cup before confidently placing it back on the table. Okay, I have an idea if you want to hear it. Alan looked more awake now. Good. They all needed to be. Go ahead, he said. We don't worry about it too much while the sun is up. If it's beneath the rubble, it could only get out via more tunnels in the sand. But we also blew the shit out of the area, and I bet the majority of the soft stuff has scattered. Might be a bit much for a small M2 entity to burrow through rock quickly. You're assuming the church's remains don't provide enough cover for a larger creature, Kojo said. We need to check that first. Sarah nodded impatiently. Yes, and once we get the ROV in the water, we can check that. But at sundown, that's when we need to be ready and have a plan. Why? Hippie asked. You think it'll be eager to find a new hiding place? Wouldn't you? Sarah said in return. Regardless, it'll need to feed. If we can catch it with UV in its liquid state, it'll combust like it did with the phosphorus. Only this time, we won't take the risk of poisoning ourselves. And the bloody reefs, Kojo muttered. Them too, Alan said. Got it. So we have light arrays. We can use the ROV to place them. That's going to mean another trip out there, but we can stay in the boat and drive the drone from there. Hours of work, Kojo groaned. That's my penance for not getting blown up down there? Was your choice to stay topside, Alan said. Still got the better end of the deal, Hippie said. So, we run this like a stakeout? Sarah blinked at him. What? Shifts, Kojo said. Take turns driving, keeping each other awake, all that buddy cop nonsense. Hippie clicked his tongue in a cadenceless sequence, and Kojo pointed at him. Like that? Yes, Sarah said. I've been meaning to ask, what is the clicking? Kojo and Hippie grinned at one another. Rags and Alan quickly joined them. Sarah didn't know whether to be afraid or amused. Animal speak, Hippie said. Old tradition of the animals. Supposedly it's Daman, a descendant of the Lardale people, taught it to the early teams. However, that's actual tourist-level bollocks as an explanation. High fantasy from drunken dimwits. Animal speak is more like Morse code than Daman. Still got the dashes and dots, but with pigeon phrases and shortcuts. She raised an eyebrow. Why would you possibly need that? Kojo clicked a phrase with the ease of long practice. Hippie rolled his eyes. You're a right cunt, Kojo. Sarah laughed. Okay, fair enough. Just never had something like that with my squads. Didn't need it most of the time. Was mostly hisses and fingers. Alan nodded knowingly and held a glass of ice water against the cut on his scalp. Different kind of warfare. Different battlefields. Different enemies, Rags said. She finished her banana and nearly folded the peel into the rind's original shape. Is this thing going to come after us? The question wasn't one Sarah had honestly considered. Would M2 do something like that? Was it capable, at any size, of holding a grudge? Capable, yes. But what would be the point? Right now, it needed to escape deeper into the ocean, not tangle with other predators. I don't know, Sarah said, and I don't want to give it the chance. Rags nodded before luxuriating in a long stretch. Then let's fry the fucker. Buddy cop time it is. She glanced at Sarah. Guess you'll have to float. Float? Be on call, so to speak, Rags said, since we don't have a partner for you. Meaning you, Hippie, and Alan get some sleep, while Kojo and I lay out a buoy, lines, and the control systems. And the UV light arrays, Alan said. Those too, although I doubt we'll have them in place before next shift. Alan looked at Sarah. Okay, sound good? For the first time since she stepped off the plane, Sarah felt like she was in some semblance of control. They had a plan. Not a good one, but a plan was something she could engage in, execute, and evolve. In a way, she'd never needed one so badly in her life. Sounds excellent, she said, sipping her water. Maybe when we show up for the next shift, you'll have some idea of how to replace the phosphorus with something that won't kill us? Alan rolled his eyes. I'll send K&B a nastygram. Sarah finished her glass of water, and a wave of fatigue rolled over her. She needed her bunk, and she needed it now. If you'll excuse me, I need to lie down, she said, rising from the table. Kojo stood as if to steady her, or at least be prepared to catch her, but Sarah managed to hold her balance just fine once her knees decided to work. She smiled gratefully at him before heading down to her stateroom. She pulled the secure laptop from its place on the shelf, authorized herself, and opened the mail client. In 5 minutes, she'd written a summary report promising additional information as it became available. Alan would have been proud to know she'd mentioned the blasted phosphorus rounds. Sarah read through the report twice before finally reading it aloud. There were still a few opportunities for clarity, but she realized she was too damn tired to care. If Moore wanted additional details, the woman could make a phone call. After peeling off her clothes, taking a quick shower, and climbing beneath the bed's covers, she greeted sleep like an old lover.